So again, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, but how much customer insider value is there for a kebab brand to then go and say, we feel really sorry? So I think brands should think about what their customers need and not how to post on social.
Welcome to Punchy by Rival, where we take the gloves off to share the hard-hitting realities of the challenger marketing world. Each week, we'll break down the buzz and cut through the BS of the top stories and trends to tell you what you really need to know and do differently to grow your brand and career.
Hello. Don't adjust whatever you're watching this on. I'm not Eric Fulweiler. My name is Dubose Cole. I'm filling in for Eric today as the host of Punchy. So welcome, and we can't wait to get started. So we've got two amazing guests with us today, and we'll talk about the format of it in a moment. But first, I'd love to introduce them. First, we have Sandra Höfler from Ticketmaster, and Sandra's introduction that I've been given is incredible. So before I turn things over to Sandra, I'd love to say a few things. Sandra is not only impressive because she is multilingual, but she speaks German, English, and Spanish. She's also a marketing expert who's worked across the UK, Europe, the US, and LATAM. We went on your LinkedIn. One of your LinkedIn recommendations describes you as no matter how complex the problem, she will always come up with a brilliant, elegant, and cost-effective solution. Who would not want her on their team? Leading up to this event, most interestingly, Sandra posted on LinkedIn saying she was looking forward to throwing some punches against Jenna Cummings. So let's hope that Jenna is ready for that. But before we get to what Jenna's response is for that, please welcome Sandra Höfler, Senior Director of Performance Marketing at Ticketmaster. Welcome, Sandra.
Thanks so much. Pleasure to be here.
So you're throwing hands against Jenna then. That's why you're here today. That's what you're ready for.
I mean,
anything specific or just in general?
I mean, you know, Jenna, she knows basically everything. So I made sure I'm ready, and we're at Punchy. So we're going to throw around some metaphorical punches, I guess.
Those are fighting words. Those are metaphorical fighting words. So I'll introduce our second guest for the day, Jenna. Jenna, what do you think about that?
I'm so excited that Sandra is no longer my client, so that there's no boundaries anymore. It's going to be great. It's going to be really good. Now there's just friendship boundaries. Go. Yeah. Now the worst outcome of this is that I just have to pay for lunch next week. It's like, that's like the worst possible outcome of this. Yeah.
See, there we go. No professional relationships at risk, only friendships here on Punchy. And exactly. Only a lunch at, I imagine, a Nando's, or we're going higher quality, lower quality.
We do fancy lunches. We do like a nice, we usually do Soho lunch. Yeah.
Ooh. We might have a favorite
Nando's.
Place.
Yes.
Which I think actually, Jenna, you introduced me to.
Chocho Mate, classic. Yes. One of the only places where I'm like on board with the Asian fusion trend. Really good. Punchy, marketing news and restaurant recommendations.
It's like TripAdvisor, but a really, really ineffective way to get recommendations.
Yeah.
So before we jump into other lunch recommendations and some of the news stories of the day, it's probably worth a bit of a reminder about the format and how Punchy works. So we are going to talk about some of the most interesting marketing news of the week. We'll summarize the news, and each guest is going to be given 1 minute to offer their initial thoughts. There will be a countdown clock that you're going to notice. Following this, there'll be a few minutes of open discussion. And then I will be handing out points to the speakers. If you've ever watched this before, the system is completely rigged because I've only won it twice. So now I've taken over the system, and I just get to decide who wins. But there'll be points in the pretense of a competition. And then finally, the winner will get a few minutes to talk about another story or another point of view that is near and dear to them. But before we hop in to who that winner will be, let's start with the stories. So the first one is Sandra's. You brought a story from Marketing Week about looking at your brand from the customer's perspective, not the other way around. This was an incredibly interesting story because it talked about how marketers had responded to the Queen's death. One of those things, especially for those of us in the UK, that had quite a lot of cringeworthy responses. Jenna, was that you like waving to the Queen, or was that you keeping the lights on in the motion detecting kind of booth you're in?
Keeping the lights on. I will use it as both emphasis during this, but mostly it's just to keep the lights on. Sorry.
Okay, so there was no point to emphasize there. Got you. But as we mentioned, there were a lot of brands that hit the mark, I assume, but a lot more that didn't. One can only assume Domino's' tribute to the Queen was one that the Windsors probably didn't expect. Sandra, you have a minute. Please tell us a little bit more about what you think about all of this.
Brilliant. Well, thanks to both. I personally spent that week, amongst other things, cringing with some of my peers, marketing peers, about why do certain brands actually think they could take part of this conversation? Yes, we had pizza ranches, but also kebab stores, and my personal favorite, an online sex shop. So again, I think many of the marketers out there at this point sometimes seem to forget what marketing is about. We're supposed to be customer advocates, right? Our job is to understand what customers want and need, and then represent them in the business to fulfill those needs and communicate how we can help them through advertising. It is not about posting on social media and just jumping on any trend. So again, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, but how much customer insight and value is there for a kebab brand to then go and say, we feel really sorry? So I think brands should think about what their customers need and not how to post on social.
I think it's an amazing point you raise. I know in the article, it was Sarah Carter, I believe, said, marketers should have Post-it notes on their desks saying consumers don't give a shit. People's indifference to brands and advertising should be the starting point. And I think it's a point where I imagine there are not many brands that during the Queen's death, people were sitting down wondering what their opinion was. So if you're starting from that point of disinterest, you really have to bring some value. Jenna, what do you think?
Okay, I agree with the thesis of this article. Like, of course, like this is true. I can't tell you like how irritated I used to get like in my media planner days, which were all like 6 months ago, when clients would be like, well, hey, we really want, like show us like this sequential like storytelling of this campaign. Like first someone will see like our ad like on Facebook, and then they see the out of home ad or whatever. And like the idea that people experience ad campaigns sequentially, that like you're just like a person being like, yes, I see the continuation of the narrative theme between my Facebook ad, my YouTube, like that's just like nonsense. So this is a good point. I agree with this, but I will say that I do not agree with a lot of the particular supporting aspects that he cites as like examples of like, this is just stupid or bullshit, ineffective marketing. Like when he talks about like abandoned brand purpose, like open, like nobody like, opens their fridge and like, says like, oh, I care about, what was it, like Hellman's Mayo's, like, POV on environmental and social issues. Nobody got to their brand standing by caring about those things, which just seems like an old man yells at cloud. Like, I think that's not like, an appropriate or, like remark that reflects actually the current landscape of actually Gen Z consumers do care about those things and they're like the future. And there was a couple things like that. Again, I agree with the point. I'm not always crazy about how Mark Ritson makes his points, and I don't really necessarily agree with, again, some of the things that he talks about. He's like, why should you care about a consistent brand look and feel? I don't know, because of like 50 years of academic research that shows that like actually like those things matter for how you psychologically perceive brands and like all this other stuff. Okay, I'm with the headline, the body of this article. I can really take or leave. That's my POV. As I wave my arms
there you
around
go.
Emphatically.
The wacky, wild, inflatable arms marketing inflatable arm expert too, has. We've bought too many. They're on sale. But I think there's an interesting point that you've raised there, in that there's probably two ways we can think about coming from a consumer perspective. There's what moments and opportunities we actually want to tap into, and then there's how you plan campaigns. Because I think there is that idea that we tend to think of a narrative thread that probably doesn't exist for many people, except if you work in advertising, where you went, oh, that builds on what I saw from the pre-roll a few weeks ago. That's nice. It's expanding the moment there. I guess one thing I'd be curious about to see what either of you think is, so how do you tell when it's appropriate to show up in a moment as a brand? Or is it just one of those things where we should do away with moments and content calendars as much as possible?
I guess it depends, right? I think to Jenna's point, like some of the comments in the article are probably rather pointed and rather extreme. But the reason why I chose the article is like there was just so many brands that jumped on that wagon. And I think if it makes sense for you as a brand to have a voice in this conversation, if it actually contributes to your customer and what you stand for, then yes, be part of it, right? But be smart about it and not necessarily go, oh, everyone is talking about it, we now need to come up with an opinion and then join the conversation. If the opinion doesn't come to you naturally, don't force it.
That's a great point. Jenna, anything you build on?
I do think that's true, but I will say that one of the things, oh man, I definitely remember having the thought reasonably close to the beginning of the pandemic, as I'm sure like many people just have those passing thoughts of, there are so few things that like are universal or like, big cultural or human experiences anymore, where it's like media, consumption is so like the Beatles will never happen again because like music is so fragmented that like we just can't have those types of universal like cultural experiences anymore. COVID then happened, and that was a nice global universal cultural experience that we all had. But honestly, and not to be like morbid or disrespectful about it, the death of the Queen, I think, really was one of those weird kind of like universal things where like, even if you weren't British or even if you weren't a freak like me who was like, oh my God, I really want to see what happens in London when the Queen dies. It like everybody knew who she was. Like an entire generation of people literally lived and died with like this person as like the most prominent like reigning monarch kind of deal. And I think in this specific case, like that's just such a weird, not everybody did great content about it, but I kind of don't necessarily mind for this one specific thing that was such a big global thing, even though people had really mixed opinions about it. In this case, I'm kind of like, yeah, I don't know. Everybody did have an opinion about it. Every person pretty much had an opinion about or some level of interest in the Queen dying. For this one, I don't know why brands like couldn't show up for that one. For a lot of other things, like no, every brand does not have to have a post about random, the start of like, Women's History Month or whatever else. Like that doesn't make sense for a lot of brands to comment on like those types of things. The death of the Queen was like everybody paid attention to that. I don't know.
Yeah, but sorry that I'm jumping in here. At the same time, I think is where do you draw the line, right? I had a conversation with a friend of mine. She had a big marketing team in Germany. They were going to do a post about it. And she was like, I'm so glad I stopped it because we literally have nothing to contribute here. We don't even sell in the UK. So like, I think the question is, where do you draw the line, right?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Yeah, probably, yeah, a German company that doesn't sell in the UK, probably, yeah, they don't need to post about it. I feel like, yeah.
Only the UK's largest maker of crazy bread. That's the one who has to put out the serious post that helps reassure the public, and a sex shop. So
I really wanted more brands to lean into, I know that I talk about this a lot, the weird surrealist Gen Z memes that are like like post-Dadaist like abstraction, like deep fried memes. There were some really good ones about the death of the Queen, and I really wish that more brands had actually done that, because there was some really like gold in like that kind of cut. The internet did a really good job, I feel like, with the death of the Queen. There was some great stuff that came out of it. Yeah, this is a very callous thing to say, but
it always does what it needs to. So Let's move on to the second story, the opposite of the internet, mail. So Jenna, this is your story where we have an article from Adweek about why the surprising rise of direct mail isn't a surprise at all, where there's been a shift away from paid digital ads towards a new direction, direct mail. Digital ads have been in the spotlight for years as savvy marketers attempt to make waves online, but as the article may claim, they're becoming increasingly ineffective. In return, we're seeing a growth in direct mail. The author of this article, the CEO of Postcard Mania, so obviously there are no kind of ulterior motives there, argues that people still enjoy receiving mail, but consumers are looking at mail for a longer amount of time. Jenna, direct mail, is it hot again?
Okay, so I definitely have to admit that, yeah, like I said, the guy who wrote this is clearly biased. But I picked this a little bit out of like some weird, I guess, like generational interest, where it's like, for the same reason that I find like records, like vinyl records, to be really fascinating, and I have a dear and desperate professional aspiration to buy a plane wrap, and that I think that cash is not real money and that the fake numbers in my bank account are what's real. I just think that this is a really interesting, like, actually, yeah, as like the distribution and the fragmentation of like digital spaces becomes really significant, I think that, like, I don't know, as a member of my generation of like millennial marketers, like not forgetting that actually like, I'm taking the effectiveness and like the time spent with mail like statistics in here with a really heavy grain of salt, like considering the source. But the point is correct that there are now like ways, and I hate this word too, to find synergies between digital campaigns and like these kind of like offline campaigns. I will say that I agree with Mark Rickson about the distinction between digital and traditional mostly being dead, but direct mail as a channel is really interesting to me. And again, it was more just kind of a like, oh yeah, like this is a good supplement to kind of digital campaigns, and was interesting. I just thought it was interesting. Yeah, that was my 2 cents.
So there we have it. Money's not completely real. It's an imaginary construct. Up is down, down is up, and only direct mail is the tangible thing that can tell us where to go in the world. Yeah. Sandra, what do you think?
I love that summary first and foremost. And when I saw the article, I got like really excited because I was like, oh, Jenna and I were going to disagree on this. It's going to be great. So I actually used to run print mail back in the days when I was still in New York. And it was quite profitable for us in that point because we would do shared mailers, and we effectively, in full honesty, had the other companies pay for it. But I think when it comes to production costs, delivery time, cost for mailing, and the data that you can get to make sure it is at least somewhat targeted, I just don't see how direct mail is going to be efficient. Like, it feels very much like, let's just do a massive blast and see what happens. And the performance marketer in me cries a little bit with these approaches. So I'm saying big no. I wouldn't do a direct mail. I would do it in B2B. Yes, I wouldn't do it in B2C. And I get that everyone's looking for a holy grail now that we know that the cookies are going to go away, but I don't think print mail is the answer.
Okay, I'll concede the point that print mail is not the answer, that it's not appropriate for even like arguably like most people. But I really think, Sandra, like again, like as one performance marketer or another, as well as I do, that a lot of like the data that we make decisions on, like in performance, like media and marketing, in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, only has the appearance of superiority over like the targeting that is available like via direct mail. I mean, like when you think about like what match rates are like between like, audiences on different platforms, where it's like, if you're excited about a 40% match rate for your audience, like on Facebook, which I think is actually like a pretty good like benchmark these days, can you really be like, well, the data and the targeting for direct mail is like, it's garbage on digital in a lot of places too, but it looks more real. I don't know. Again, I'm really not advocating that like all brands do this, but it is more kind of a like, I don't know, from my own like biases or things that like I forget for clients is like actually like it's not just the immediate like Googles and the Facebooks of the world. For some clients, you do got to suss out like those types of edge cases for distribution channels kind of deal.
And again, I totally knew that you were going to jump on that measurement piece and talk about overlap rates and measurement in digital space, because I know that's your thing. I just think, again, I'm a little nervous about how much information you would actually be able to get. Like, okay, US Postal Service is one thing, but talking about Europe, thinking about GDPR, like how much data are you actually going to get to make decisions off? Other than, oh, this is a very wealthy neighborhood, and oh, we assume this person has a household of 3 people with potentially children, and that might be interesting. So I think, yes, I'm with you that measurement in digital is difficult. I just think in traditional is even more challenging.
And I think there you might raise an interesting... Well, plain wraps are a separate thing, Jenna, because are we basically then talking about direct mail not as kind of a solution, but as a fix to what we see as the bigger problem in digital? Are there better solutions to what we're seeing in digital channels? And direct mail is just purporting to be the one, but there's probably more planes out there that need wrapping.
Yeah, again, like I said, I'm not, this is not intended to be me advocating that like direct mail appear on more media plans, right? I mean, like maybe, I don't actually know. I don't know what the relative incidence of it is in major media plans kind of deal. But more just like, frankly, I would have assumed that the direct mail industry was like functionally dead. I used to work in book publishing. As far as I'm aware, physical media are like toast. I don't know the last time I actually opened a piece of mail. I have not opened my mailbox in over 6 weeks back in Brooklyn. I have no idea. So more of it was just kind of like, other people that are not millennials that live in Brooklyn or East London actually do, in fact, open their mail. Maybe that's an insight that I could apply at some point in time in the future. And also, I really want to buy a plane wrap. And I really, actually, it occurs to me now that we need to start incorporating this into our outbound new business strategy is, do you want to buy a plane wrap? We're the agency for you.
There you go. We have two things we take out of this. A, there are a worrying amount of correspondence to Jenna that are jammed into a rapidly overflowing mailbox somewhere in New York at the moment. Do you get anything that you need to respond to by mail?
No. Again, it's like, if it's really important, well, actually, I don't even have an American phone number, so they won't call me, but
that's not how bills work.
Like, no. All my bills are set up to paperless, so I assume that anything that comes through the mail is like not important. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe there's a subpoena.
You're getting direct mail and you're trying to avoid it,
or just like, I don't know. I just don't think about it when I like go home at night. But my point is, most people are not like me. And, like there probably are some people who do check and read their mail, maybe, I guess.
Well, on that point, we'll round off the second story. I think the one thing we haven't done is talk about points yet. I think, coming out of that first round, I thought both of you raised some amazing points. So I think from question 1, I'm going to give Jenna 10. So you get 10 points here in the double digits. I'll give Sandra 11. I think in the second one, a worrying amount of conversation about plane wraps and lack of bill payment in mail means I think someone who hasn't checked their mail in 6 months can't advocate for direct mail. I'm sorry, it's a rule. It's like saying that you don't believe in radio advertising and all you listen to is the BBC. So I'm going to give Sandra 10 points, so she's on 21, and I'm going to give Jenna 10 points as well, so she's on 20. So you're still in this. It's in no way rigged, Jenna. It's in no way like professional wrestling. Actually, you know what, Jenna, you've got 22. You're a point ahead. You're winning. You're winning right now, and that's not for dramatic change. Going into our final story, it's one I brought, and it's about chicken. So if you've been on TikTok lately, you may have noticed a challenge called the Nyquil Chicken Challenge. For those British listeners of us, translate it to the Night Nurse Popcorn Chicken Challenge. But generally, this is a bit like everything in the internet. Someone taking a product and doing the one thing a brand manager would never want to have happen with it. So the general kind of focus is that NyQuil marinated chicken cooked in a skillet burst into mainstream news coverage following an FDA advisory in the States not to cook chicken in cold medication. The FDA said the ingredients can be concentrated into dangerous and potentially toxic fumes in the process. And NyQuil has been relatively mum on the subject, but they have been discouraging inappropriate use of the product over Twitter. I think one of the interesting things here is it's very, very evocative of the Tide Pods challenge in late 2017 and 2018, where people started making joking memes about eating detergent pods until Tide had to come out and in probably one of the first signs of the apocalypse we now live in, convince people that detergent is not candy. And I think the wider issue here, aside from just the recipes people may come up with, and how chicken probably is better seasoned, but not with cold medication, is down to the idea of brand safety. So what I'd like to open up to the two guests, and we'll start with you, Jenna, is what do we do as brand managers or as marketers when we hand products over to people and they instantly do the worst thing they can think of with them?
This is so much more disgusting than the Tide Pod challenge, honestly. This one was actually really hard for me. I got a little queasy looking at this one. So not safe for life, content warning on when we actually post this article. It's just gross. This is gross. But honestly, I don't think that you can do anything about if you're the Procter and Gamble brand manager for this. This is such a you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So I feel like you just shut up about it. And you kind of with how quickly viral trends move these days, they've always moved quickly, but I feel like it's just really been increased in the TikTok era. I think you just shut up about it and wait for the next thing, because the more time and attention that you give it, you prevent kind of the viral cycle from moving on a little bit. Really wasn't the Tide Pods challenge. I think it was 2 or 3 people actually really got injured. It was not a huge number of people. And this one is just so disgusting that I think you just let normal human common sense play out. And I can't believe I just said that, but yeah, I feel like that's the only option. I don't know. This is gross.
There you have it. Sandra, what do you think?
So me not being American, I read the article and then I actually Googled what Nyquil is, and I might want bonus points for that because I put effort into this. And I totally freaked. So again, I'm fully with Jenna on this one. It's not only that I'm thinking this must taste terrible, also the chicken ends up being blue. Who wants to eat blue chicken? Again, it was one of those where I looked at it and was like, I cannot believe people do this. And more importantly, I cannot believe that people didn't get that it was meant as a joke. So coming back to your question about what you do when you're the brand manager of this brand and it comes to your table, I think to Jenna's point, where certain topics nowadays are just so much faster viral than they were before, I think what you should do is make sure you know someone at TikTok and get this blocked, right? Like, again, in the article said that what the hashtag started going viral in January. There was even some like American comedian jokes all over the place, and they only put a warning message in September. That's too late. Like, again, I'm going to spin it on its head and I'm going to put it back onto social media platform responsibilities of like non-fake content and algorithms. I'm not going to go down the Facebook and Instagram route, but I still think TikTok needs to take responsibility and act on certain things faster.
I think you raise an amazing point where I think they were saying the hashtag was sleepy chicken that was there since January, and at a certain point finally got a warning message in summer. And I imagine it is probably someone's job, especially at TikTok, just to think about all the different hashtags they probably have to put warnings next to. But I think that idea of the responsibility lying with the platform, not so much with the brand, is an interesting one, especially if there's the idea that you get a bit of a kind of Streisand effect on things if the brand comes out and starts to actually acknowledge it, because then it gives a second life to it. So I guess we'd all agree then that as far as chicken recipes go, this isn't a good one.
I feel like also this might be one of those things that I kind of wish like more like marketers would maybe lean into like gray hat like tactics on this, where it was like, what was the like Boris Johnson got accused of this, where it was like they said like he planted like stories about like, you know, he threw like a wine and cheese party or whatever to distract from the other like news search terms around like the inquiries to like his, or it's like, you know, Boris Johnson like bus, he, you know, put in like stories about him like missing the bus or something to distract from the like the lies on the NHS figures or whatever. And like, okay, sleepy chicken, you know, actually will be like a way better like sleepy chicken. It's just normal fried chicken because you're really sleepy after you eat it. And I feel like, you know, lean into like, all right, like let's go get a bunch of like influencers to go make other like fried chicken recipes for us and like take over like the sleepy chicken like nap after you like eat a bunch of fried chicken. That's a really terrible idea because I'm not a creative, but I do think that there's like something in that about like, all right, well, like steer into the skid. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Yes, but at the same time, again, you should be able as a brand to reach out to TikTok and say like, hey, we need to do something about this. You need to tweak your algorithm. Again, if you own a platform that has more reach than most TV channels in a single country, you cannot just pretend that you're not in charge of the content that's on the platform. Sorry.
Oh, no one hates TikTok's lack of responsibility more than me, Sandra. I agree entirely. But maybe, yeah, for like a less serious one where like the FDA had to get involved for this, like this is like an actual, like, you know, when regulators get involved, then yes, it's a little bit more serious maybe than like leaning into fried chicken recipes as a response. But for something like a little bit like less serious with the health of people involved, like, you know, I don't know. Yeah, steer into the skid, maybe. That's probably not
steer into the skid. There you have it. Flood the hashtag with influencers talking about other chicken recipes. I think we'll have to leave it there. Some great points on both sides. I think, you know, this is one of those things where hands were thrown, but I think overall, if we're at 22 points for Jenna, 21 points for Sandra, let's give 9 points to Jenna. So that puts us on 31. And
Good
Sandra,
math.
congratulations, you're on 32. So Sandra is our winner. It was very, very close. And because of that, you get the floor is yours. So you have an additional minute to just chat about whatever you'd like, a rant or a rave.
Cool. Thanks a lot. I feel like I totally won this by myself and there was no rigging in this at all. I I do want to give a rave. I feel like we've been ranting about a lot of things, and something that might not necessarily have made the news that much in the last 2 weeks is that the European Commission actually now finally signed the Digital Markets Act. I'm very big on data privacy. So for those of you that don't know, the Digital Markets Act will limit the degree of market power that the Big Four will have in the European Union. So it's meant to increase competition. It's meant to support smaller players to enter the market. And effectively, it comes with a huge fine. It's 10% of global turnover or 20% for repeat offenses. And in a nutshell, why should anyone in Europe care about it? A, Amazon can no longer use your own data of the products you sell on their platform to produce their own Amazon product and sell it cheaper and kick you out. Google and Amazon can't rank their own products anymore on top of yours to get more traffic and more sales. And my personal favorite, you can actually delete your Facebook account now in the European Union. Starting March, when the law comes into effect, you will actually be able to do that. And I remember in the early days of my career, there were a bunch of data privacy lawyers in the European Union that tried to sue Facebook to allowing them to do that. And it only took almost 10 years to actually at this point get there. So I want to give a huge shout out. I find this is absolutely amazing. And I also love that the European Union is again setting new standards on how to protect customer privacy and customer rights. Because again, we had the GDPR a few years back, and it feels like we're going in the right direction. Is it going to make our lives as digital marketers harder? Yeah, probably, but I feel like it should.
Necessity is the mother of invention. Yes, that was an amazing rave. That's why we're friends, Sandra. 2 thumbs up. I mean, we're friends for other reasons too. Yeah, we're friends for other reasons too, but that's a big one.
Well, there you go. I think we'll have to leave it there with some real news about real impact on privacy and how marketers will just have to adapt to it. Thanks to everyone for the time. Sandra, thank you for joining us. Jenna, thank you for, as always, getting very, very close to winning this time. And I have a great feeling about you'll do it soon. You'll do it soon. Thanks. And please look out for this episode on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks, everyone, and goodbye.
Punchy is a production of Rival. We are a growth consultancy that builds challenger brands, strategies, and capabilities to disrupt categories. If you want to learn more about us, check out wearerival.com. If you want to connect with Jenna, Dubose, or myself, email us at media@wearerival.com or find us on LinkedIn. If you enjoyed today's show, please subscribe, share with anyone you think might enjoy it, and leave us a review. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next week.